I am not a historian, but neither are you. So, how about we the people learn this stuff together? Welcome to US 101. The new facial hair look, this is for all you guys that said I look way too much like Lin-Manuel Miranda. Here, I got the goatee for you. Do I look more like his brother now? If you've ever been to New York City, or if you've ever seen any movie with New York City in it, then you're probably familiar with this building. This is the headquarters of the United Nations, a global alliance comprising of 193 nations all working together to try to maintain world peace. Now, many people are aware of the United Nations, but not all that many people may be familiar with how the UN got its start. And furthermore, for a group whose goal is to maintain world peace, things can get a bit testy between the nations inside the General Assembly. Case in point, a couple weeks ago when Trump and North Korea pretty much almost pledged to wipe each other off of the map. So how did the United Nations get its start, and what exactly is the point of the United Nations? How about we find out? Prior to the creation of the UN, its forerunner was a group called the League of Nations. You might be familiar with that name. They were a group that was put together in 1919 following the end of World War I. Now, the idea for the League was initially introduced by President Woodrow Wilson in 1918 during his 14-point speech, which called for a, quote, General Association of Nations, end quote. Now, the League was formed under the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, and it had 58 members, and its initial goal was to, quote, promote international cooperation and to achieve peace and security, end quote. But the League, as you probably have guessed by now, did not last all that long. For starters, the United States didn't join the League of Nations, even though it was Wilson that proposed the idea of a league in the first place. Because it turns out that when it came time for the American government to vote on whether or not it should join the League, nationalist thinking, which was led by guys like Henry Cabot Lodge, swayed the Congress to vote away from joining the League. Some of Lodge's arguments included the fact that the United States should go back to a more isolationist stance, that we should focus on the problems that we have at home rather than joining a League of Nations and now involving ourselves in all of Europe's problems. And yeah, ultimately, Congress decided to vote against joining the League of Nations because they didn't want to involve themselves on any problems in Europe that might pop up. And some problems following World War I popped up. Like, for example, the fact that 3 nations in the League of Nations, Germany, Italy, and Japan, by the 1930s, they decided to team up and inform everybody, hey, we're going to try this whole world domination thing. Hope you guys don't mind. And thus, when World War II kicked off, the League of Nations disbanded because it was kind of hard for them to maintain world peace when nations within their ranks were trying to disrupt world peace. So while World War II was raging on and the Allied powers were facing off against the Axis powers, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Prime Minister Winston Churchill met aboard the USS Augusta in Newfoundland in August of 1941 to sign the Atlantic Charter. The Atlantic Charter was a document that pledged that both the United States and the United Kingdom would work together in restoring governments that had been taken over during World War II. Additionally, the document stated that both countries would not expand either of their territories following the war. They would also help to establish freedom of the seas, as well as international labor, economic, and welfare standards. And then later, in December of 1941, FDR came up with the name United Nations, and Churchill liked the name, as well as an idea of getting a new group together. So on January 1st, 1942, FDR, Churchill, and representatives from China, the USSR, and 22 other nations signed the Declaration of United Nations. And this declaration pledged that their governments would fight against the Axis powers and would preserve human rights in their countries and other countries. But it wouldn't be until April 25 of 1945 that the first United Nations delegation would meet together as one body, and they met in San Francisco, California. And it was at these meetings that the United Nations Charter was drawn up and was signed by the members of 50 nations from around the world on June 26, 1945. Following the signing of the charter, it had to be ratified by other nations, which it was on October 24, 1945, thus marking the official start of the United Nations. Okay, good. Now we got the context out of the way, right? You know where the United Nations got its start and how it came into being. Now then, what does the United Nations actually do? Well, like I said at the beginning, their main goal is to try to maintain peace and security around the world. So let's start with that. How does a body like this go about maintaining peace and security on a global scale? especially when you're a body that doesn't have its own army. Yeah, guys, the United Nations does not have its very own fighting force, okay? Its Peacekeeping Force, also known as the Blue Helmets because they wear blue helmets, is about 100,000 strong. And the reason it's so big is because members of armed forces from member states volunteer their time to be a part of the Peacekeeping Force. So you've got members from the United States military, Canadian military, Mexican military, European militaries. All these people, they come together and they comprise the Peacekeeping Force of the UN. Furthermore, while the General Assembly, aka the 193 countries that make up the UN, deliberate these global issues, it's actually the Security Council that takes charge on determining what actually constitutes a global threat. And the Security Council is small. It's only made up of 15 member states, 5 of which, by the way, have permanent seats on the Security Council. And those 5 member states are the United States, the United Kingdom, France, China, and Russia. Plus, it's these 5 member states that have absolute veto power in the Security Council, meaning that if a resolution is looking to be adopted by all the other member states of the Security Council, any one of those 5 countries can completely shut down the resolution because of their place in the Security Council. See what happens when you win World War II? Then you've got the Economic and Social Council, which is made up of 54 members, and they're in charge of policy review, policy dialogue, and they're the ones that offer up recommendations when it comes to economic, environmental, and social issues. One of the main points of the UN's mission statement is to promote sustainable growth in countries around the world. And this council heads up that facet by working with those countries to help them grow and sustain that growth. Then you've got the International Court of Justice, which is based at a place called the Peace Palace, which is located in The Hague. And no, this is not a place that comes out of the world of Harry Potter. It's actually a place that you can visit because it's based out of the Netherlands, thus making the International Court of Justice the only main arm of the UN that doesn't have its headquarters in New York City. Its main function is to uphold international law, and how it does that is by settling disputes between member states, and it also offers legal advice to the UN when it needs it. Then there's the Secretariat, and no, I'm not talking about the horse. Although if you did get that reference, then you are old like me. Now, the Secretariat is comprised of everyone that works at the UN that handles basically the day-to-day stuff, the paperwork, so forth and so on, okay? And they're overseen by the Secretary General of the United Nations. And for the record, there are thousands of people that work at the United Nations, man. This is not a small organization. And then finally, there's the Trusteeship Council, which does not exist anymore. That was disbanded in 1994. But their job, when they were around, was to help prepare territories become their own independent nations. And during its time, the Trusteeship Council helped 70 territories become independent countries. As to whether or not the United Nations has actually been doing any good in the world as of recently, is still a topic that's very much up for debate. Trump has claimed that the United Nations needs to be rebooted so that it can become more effective. And that's what I want to ask you guys to end this episode. What are your thoughts on the UN and its place in the world, man? Do you guys think that it's an organization that does provide a lot of good globally? Or do you think that it's a group that now has just become nothing but a showpiece? Let me know your thoughts. And that, my friends, is it for this episode of US 101. Thank you guys, as always, for checking out the episode. I really do appreciate it. And as always, thanks to all of you that have subscribed to the channel, for liking the videos, for sharing them, and for leaving comments in the comment section. The dialogue is the absolute best part of what I get to engage in when it comes to running this channel. I love talking to you guys, man. As always, you can follow US 101 on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All those links down below in the description box. Go ahead and click on them and follow us in the world of social media. And I will see you guys next Tuesday for an all-new episode of US 101. Until then, I am all done. And just on a side note, to all those that were affected in Las Vegas with the recent shooting that happened, I hope you guys are all okay. And if you are okay, let your families know, let your friends know, because we love you guys, and we will do whatever we can to help you. So I hope you guys are all right. See you guys next week.